So,
Rabbi Mark,
thank you.
what's the podcast called, Rabbi Mark?
That is a good question. I'll tell you a second. I have got my handy dandy Google machine right here, and I'll take a look at the podcast, and it is called Spirituality and Health with Rabbi Rami.
Okay.
And as I scrolled down a number of the podcasts, there was not one Jewish person that he interviewed. So let's say the blessing for Torah study as we enter into week 8 of the sacred art of loving kindness. I haven't decided yet whether this is going to be the last night. We have a lot of material to cover. I kind of had decided before that we would just skim through it and we would ask Rabbi Rami any questions that we had. And perhaps this would be the last night, but you can let me know whether or not you want to continue after tonight. But certainly we'll all get back together, just us, when Rabbi Rami's feeling up to it. So let's say the blessing for Torah study, and then I want to share with you a lovely article that Rami wrote. He has been part of he's written blogs, and this one's from something called the Copper Beach Institute. Well, let's say the blessing first. La'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I'm not going to screen share with you. Why don't you just hear the words? Close your eyes if you want to. I'll be your podcaster here. So the title of the article is Seeking the Mystic Heart of All Religion. You are my Rebbe. Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shulamit told me years ago, a Jewish practitioner of perennial wisdom. He was trying to help me understand my relationship with Judaism. I was born into an Orthodox Jewish family, but in my mid-teens, I found myself more at home in Zen practice and Taoist philosophy. After completing a degree in Buddhist studies and hoping to find in Judaism what I treasured in Buddhism, I pursued ordination as a Reform rabbi, founded a Reconstructionist synagogue, and eventually became a chassid, a disciple of Reb Zalman's neo-Hasidic Jewish renewal movement in the early 1980s. I'm going to stop there just for a moment. Shulamit, when did you meet Reb Rami?
I met him in 1997.
So quite a number of years after Rami meets Reb Zalman. So yes. Shulamit's going to kindly share a story of her meeting and her relationship with Reb Rami. I eventually became a chassid of Reb Zalman's, all the while deepening my contemplative work in a variety of religious settings: Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi, Christian, theosophical, and even Masonic. Eventually, I reached a point where labels no longer mattered to me, and I contemplated dropping the title rabbi, but not my identification as a Jew. So I hope this is giving you a nice open window into why his writing makes so much sense from where he's coming from. He was right, Reb Zalman was, and the rightness of his insight freed me to be who I am. Reb Zalman said to me, Judaism is your spiritual mother tongue. To deny that would be to become mute, or to best to render my teaching mere talk, hollow words, echoes of things I've read about but not experienced or lived. I'm a Jew. But the Judaism I hunger for is the perennial wisdom at the mystic heart of all religion. You are, Reb Zalman told me, a Jewish practitioner of perennial wisdom. It makes no difference to me where a teaching comes from. All that matters is whether or not that teaching is true. And by true, I don't mean true in some relativist sense of this is true for you and that is true for me, but in the absolute sense that what is true for all, or it is not true at all. Spiritual truth, no less than scientific truth, is testable. To test a scientific theory, I must become a scientist with expertise in that theory. I must know how to probe it, verify it, and more importantly, prove it false if I can. This takes years of study and practice. It is the same with spiritual truth. To test it, to prove it wrong, takes years of study and practice. Few of us want to put in that kind of time and effort, so we settle for belief instead. Isn't that interesting? Beliefs cannot be tested. Beliefs cannot be disproved, and for the believer, they need not be proved. Beliefs are expressions of confirmation bias. I'm going to repeat that. Beliefs are expressions of confirmation bias that avoid being revealed as such by hiding behind the sanctity of religion. We believe what we believe because it's easier to believe than to know. I am not satisfied with belief. I am only concerned with what can be known directly, personally, without the intermediary of tribe, text, or creed. And it is my experience that when we discover what can be known, we discover it has been known by the mystics of every civilization for millennia. What is known is the non-duality of God, woman, man, and nature, and the ethic of compassion and justice that arises naturally from this knowing. This is perennial wisdom. As a Jew, I tend to use the language of Judaism to express this wisdom, but it is no way limited to Judaism. As a student of religion and professor of world religions, I take delight in learning to speak this wisdom through other languages and to teach others to do so as well. And as a seeker of the fragile voice of silence, that is the ultimate word, I take refuge in the greater quiet that precedes all speech. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. And there are so many things I could lift up and scotch tape to my computer as inspirations to get me through or to see me through. Shulamit, would you share with us a little bit about your experience of Reb Rami?
I would love to, and I just have to say that you read that, and I just realized how much I miss him. I haven't seen him in quite a while. I found Jewish renewal through a book called The Jew and the Lotus. At the time that I read that book, I was about to start a year-long clinical pastoral education process to become a chaplain. And when I went to interview for that, they said, well, who's going to ordain you? And I said, because I didn't know I needed to do that. And in fact, I didn't, but I went searching. And I found Ilah Chaim, but the first thing that I found was Rami. I had gone onto the webpage and put in Zalman's name. This was long before Google. And it took me to a website called the Virtual Yeshiva, which was written by Rami Shapiro. And I read that website for about 3 days. It was full of so many links and so many things to read about Judaism and Jewish renewal and Reb Zalman and who he was. And finally, after about 3 days, it took me to a link for Ilah Chaim. And I found that there was a week coming up in which Reb Zalman was teaching in the morning and Reb Rami was teaching in the afternoon. There's a bit more to the story about my finally getting in there, but I did make a reservation and I was able to go. And obviously it was an incredible experience for me. And one of the biggest experiences was Rami. He has the biggest heart. He's just so kind. You look at him and you feel engulfed in this web of kindness. And he was teaching meditation, which I walked into the class thinking, I know how to do this. I'm a meditator. His ways were fabulous. And the things that he taught about religion in general and religion across the religions and how similar they are. And the question of, is God in everything or is everything in God? And other great subjects. And I think the thing that I carry with me even today is that he said, if you really want to be a meditator, you wake up in the morning and you put your tushy on the pillow and you meditate. And that's the way you do it. And my comment was, I have to go to the bathroom first. He's a truly lovely man, and I hope that we have the blessing of being able to actually be with him. And I'll thank you in advance for all your prayers for his good health.
Mm.
Thanks for letting me tell my story.
You know, you're a pretty good storyteller, Shulamit.
Am I really?
Yeah, you might want to think about studying with someone.
Maybe I will. What a great idea.
So what did Rabbi Rami say when you said you couldn't start in the morning right away, that you had to go to the bathroom first?
We just all laughed. Everybody laughed. I suppose if you do that and come back and really do sit, it's the perfect thing. Yeah, there was a lot of laughter in his class as well.
Thank you.
It's funny. I just remembered while you were talking, Shulamit, that I met Rami in 1986.
Oh,
It was the first time. It was my first summer at Lama Foundation, and Rami was teaching. Andy Gold was the coordinator, and he had brought Rami, and I don't know who else was teaching, but it was like an interspiritual and interfaith. It was an interfaith retreat, and Rami was the Jewish teacher. I wasn't in the retreat because I was on staff, but I remember meeting him then. I was probably in his early time of, I think it was a Florida rabbi then.
he was. And the part of the story that I didn't tell is that I lived on the opposite coast. But early on, when I was studying with Fred Marshall, I probably made 4 or 5 trips across to Miami so that I could spend the weekend with Rami. And that was an even more special treat because it was just he and I.
Nice. So welcome to everyone who was in the waiting room. I hope you were offered a drink while you were there. While you were there, I was reading a piece that Rami wrote, because you'll notice that he's not here. We promised last week that he'd be with us, but his wife remembered that he had a procedure that he needed to have, and it turns out that it turned up something that needs to be addressed. And so he's quote unquote okay, but he was not up to being with us tonight. I'm delighted, actually, looking around, that everyone who's with us tonight has been with us before. And that's wonderful. You know, at one point, in this journey of unpacking this book, I had a little trepidation, honestly, that some people will say, "Oh, Rami Shapiro's going to be there tonight. Oh, tonight I'm going."
That was me. I haven't been.
Oh, well, welcome, Amy. We haven't been talking about you. Don't worry.
I came for Rabbi Rami, not for you, Mark. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you for that.
No, I still need to get the book. I mean, it's on the list.
But I think that we'll catch you up on what's going on in the book. And he truly was sorry that he wasn't up to coming. And we agreed that as soon as he's up to it, we'll reconvene and we'll get together. And so part of this evening, I'm going to confess being a little less prepared than in other weeks to lead on my own. Because my intention was to lean on your questions and my questions to Reb Rami. But let's see, we are picking up on page 97, and we're actually going to begin on page 111. What I would like to do, as we have been doing on some of the sessions, is to go around and for as many of you who would like to, just add a sentence of some takeaway that you've had so far from the book. In other words, what are some themes that he comes back to over and over and over again? Seemingly repetitive, but repetitive because it's fitting in within a different context of a different midah, a different characteristic. of the 13 attributes. So what are some of the takeaways that that you're bringing with you tonight as we start our descent, our landing, this airplane, on the last few words, beginning with Notzir Chesed Lalafim, preserving kindness for the world, on page 97. So what's come before? Where are we? Anybody? You can repeat yourself if you've said it before. It's totally fine. What are some of the major themes? Bruce?
A spacious mind, I believe, as opposed to narrow mind.
Right. So this, and it's interesting that you choose that, because on page 110, right before where I'm picking up, he goes into that. And for those of us who meditate, or those of us who have some kind of intentional practice about being present, I mean, we know when we are in a narrow place. We're in Mitzrayim this week. This is a good place to be picking up, tonight, with the narrow mind versus spacious mind. Bruce, I don't know if you know, Mitzrayim, meaning Egypt, meaning ancient Egypt. The root of it is tsar, a narrow place. So there's like the feeling of getting squeezed in that slave of being enslaved does to us. But of course, the Chassids, the Hasidic mind, and the rabbis playing with it, look at it in a psycho-spiritual way, in that this is a place that we all need to be liberated from. So narrow-minded versus spacious mind. Moachin de katnut, you hear the word katan in there. That's small, like a yeled katan, a small child, versus a moachin de gadlut, gadol, right? So what else? Narrow mind, spacious mind. Mary Rita.
I'm just going back to the beginning again, that I am the image of God, and and to live in the image of God means to act with the likeness of God, with loving kindness.
There you go. Acting and seeing oneself in the image of God and acting on that. That our impulses should be ones coming from compassion and loving kindness, and of course, love, as Rebs McCartney and Lennon teach us. That's all we need. And remember that Reb Rami wrote the poem that we precede the Shema with every week. You are loved by an unending love, right? So if you think about that the idea of unendingness, we're talking about an infinite God, a divinity that has no beginning and has no end. And that's a way to look at spacious mind as well. It's a place where we get lost and found at the same time. Anything else? Okay, if you think of something as we go on, feel free to jump in. Carol, and that's great. Carol, you have Matthew's name in there. And of course, Judy, you have Mark's name. But I know who you are. All right. So on page 10, let's go to page 110 and pick up on what Bruce was talking about. At the very bottom, spacious mind feels everything. It simply clings to nothing. Spacious mind allows all feelings to arise, notes and learns from those feelings, and allows them to fade. Feelings come and go, they fade over time. But before we go on to the sentence about narrow mind, I'm reminded that when we were talking in that chapter about Tonglen, right, the practice of holding the world's suffering, I think this is where one has to be. That if you can't do this, if you can't allow these feelings to arise, note them, and then allow them to fade, it would be a dangerous practice to take on, right? To feel all the world's suffering. Then one has to be living in this place of spacious mind, even if it's only for 5 minutes, if that's how long the practice is going to be. Otherwise, it's going to play upon our anxieties and the parts of ourselves that need some tikkun, some repair. Narrow mind, and please, as always, interrupt me if you got something to add. or question. A narrow mind tries to avoid those feelings it dislikes and cling to those it does like. Well, none of us want to feel like crap, right? However, one of the practices of entering into spiritual direction or of being a spiritual companion to someone is by holding that person's journey wherever it takes that person. And we always, in our own personal spiritual journeys, we want to look very honestly at the things that are not the happy times. I mentioned on Shabbat, I talked a little bit about my dad, for those of you who were there. And what I forgot to talk about, when I mentioned that one of the things he gave to me was a work ethic, what I forgot to mention before you went into breakthrough rooms was that work ethic, which he did, which I did inherit from him, as well as my brother, it oftentimes was not a positive thing. If I think of all the times my father was not there because work called him, I now feel cheated in a way. And and that only came up in my meditation about it. And I've used the acronym RAIN for those of you who are familiar with Tara Brach's work, for me to really look at it with honesty, and then to cleanse myself, to let it go, and with a blessing and with compassion. So spacious mind clings to nothing and has room for everything, but narrow mind tries to avoid the feelings it dislikes. Someone who claims to be so holy as to feel no emotional pain is mistaking holiness for callousness. The truly holy feel everyone's pain. They just don't hold on to it. Shulamit, please.
I just want to say that I think that's one of the most perfect lines I've heard in a long time. It's the definition of real caring and real compassion, because I need to be able to feel the pain of the person that I'm talking to in order to really meet them where they are. But then I can't hold on to it. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. And if I hold on to it, it becomes toxic.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important line.
Yeah, thank you. And what's rising in me that I think needs to be said is you don't have to be trained as a spiritual director to practice this. I'm sure I'm guilty, as many of you are, of being with a friend who brings something up that I really want to go there, and perhaps there are times that's where it needs to be treated, but there are certainly times where we need to be adim, witness to another person's turmoil, to their anxiety, to their struggles, to their journey. That is that side of the coin as well. Carol.
Yes. I find that on page 112, this whole story about the woman, the CEO, who was angry at her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as she had to pick up a business call, the anger just disappeared. And when Rami said, well, where did it go? And she said, I don't know where it went, but where did your anger go while you were on that phone call? It's just so interesting how things can turn on a dime. It's just what you do with it in your head.
That's the truth. Yeah, absolutely. And we should notice that when that happens for us.
But she resurrected it immediately when she got off the phone call.
Yeah.
It was like
It was a wonderful story. Carol Ann, did you have something? You're muted.
I think he said unmute. No, he mentions earlier about where anger comes from and where does it go. He raises that question. He said he does not know. He does not know. I recall reading that just last night. But I also like that point about where that anger comes from. You're a target. You're a target for the anger. That a lot of times we're not angry about things that don't target us, so to speak. I don't know if that's related to what you want to talk about.
But I think it's certainly an worthwhile observation. I had a theater director who he was an inspiration for putting notes on my computer. In that, if you were at his house and you went into his bathroom, there were notes all over the place, taped. And one of the things that he taped on there is don't. What's it called when you're trying to teach something to a child? What's that?
Inculcate.
Yeah.
Condescend.
Well, that's not the word I'm looking for. It's when the child has done something like really shouldn't have done. So don't try to teach your child anything when you're angry is basically what it said, because the anger, of course, is going to color everything, and it might not. You might be angry at the action, but you're not angry at the child, right? So to remember that I'm angry at what you did, but I still love you, and I can express and be honest with you that what you did, not such and such a good idea. But bad parenting probably has a basis in anger and us getting just overwhelmed at times. Learning to let go. He gives us a spiritual practice on page 113, and which is one of the things I love about the book, which is that he lays out the ideas and then he gives us a practice to play with it, right? So learning to let go through nama japa, repetition of a name of God. So the term is Sanskrit, refers to the Hindu practice of silently repeating a mantra over and over as a means of returning over and again to spacious mind. And every religion has its own version of nama japa. This is reminding me right now of, the Shlomo Carlebach song, Return Again to the Land of Your Soul. So what is that all about, to do teshuva? And some of us might work towards breathing into presence and allowing what is there to just be there and to look at it with curiosity and compassion. So that can be one practice of teshuva, which actually can be broken into two words. Teshuv, return to He, meaning to divinity. He, as in hallelujah, right? And one of the names of God. So, what are some names of God that we use in Jewish ritual practice, whether they be in prayer? Because any number of these names could be used in this way, in meditating and using a name of God. Basically, this is what he's suggesting, or not he, through this practice, as an anchor, right? So in meditation, some of us use our breath as an anchor. Some of us use a pasuk, a sentence from sacred text, and some of us use a name. We are encouraged to do that, of course, through Shiviti Adonai Lenegdi Tamid, which in many synagogues you're going to look over the Aron, over the ark, and it's going to say that, right? Or Dalifnei Ata Omed, know before whom you stand. Before whom are you standing? Yud He Vav He, right? So this practice, you can use it with the word Shalom. Shalom is also a name of God. By the way, I'm forgetting his name. He's written books, and he had an orthodox, a very, very orthodox upbringing. Not Nathan. Gosh. Anyway, there's a story that he tells about being in yeshiva, and his name is Shalom Auslander. Anybody know his work? Oh my gosh, you don't know his work. He's really a renegade, with a lot to, and very funny too. But he tells a story about being in yeshiva, and his name is Shalom. And when all the other kids are tossing their homework into the trash can or whatever, they don't need it anymore, he gets reprimanded because you can't do that. Why?
She's throwing away God's name.
That's right. Exactly. Throwing away God's name. It's a desecration. So it's just a little side story, but anyway, that could be a name that you use. And here they're repeating it, saying to repeat it as a mantra. So I suspect that the practice is an oral one, not just one that we're thinking the name, but one that we're sitting quietly and repeating the name over and over and over and over again, as we would in a chant circle, that it would accomplish the same thing, but with a lot less words. Has anybody ever played with this?
No.
Mary Rita? A couple of people.
I have, and,
Yeah.
and I did it because it was one of the suggestions. I just finished the Hitbodedut course through IJS, and one of the interpretive ways of doing Hitbodedut was just to take a name of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept repeating the name that I use is Mama Shahina, Mama Shahina, Mama
Mhm.
Shahina, and it's pretty powerful because it takes on its own kind of energy.
Yeah, that's right. Turning the page, here are some of the most common mantras. Allah, Har-Rahman. I think I might have shared with you that rabbinical colleague of mine, Dan Goldblatt, he no longer says Baruch Dayan Emet upon hearing of someone's death, which of course means blessed is the true judge or the judge of truth. This rings a bell. I think I mentioned this before. I'm looking at you, Scott. But it says instead, Baruch Har-Rahmana, blessed is the compassionate one. It's for me a little less jarring because I don't have to play theological, connect the dots, or what's that game where your arm goes there with the thing on the floor. It's a party game.
Twister.
Twister. You don't have to play theological Twister in order to say Baruch Har-Rahmana in contrast to Baruch Dayan Emet, unless you've of course worked through what Baruch Dayan Emet means to you. Allah, Rahmana, Jesus, Ram, Om, Shalom, Salam, peace, Maranatha. Let's stop here for a second. Questions, comments, inspirations, sharing, stories. Bruce.
In the Christian world, this kind of meditation loosely is called centering prayer. And it was brought it's been probably 45 or 50 years, Thomas Merton, and then later Thomas Keating. And what they've done is looked at in the second, third, and fourth centuries, when men and women went into the deserts, particularly the deserts of Egypt, but also other places in the Middle East, and lived as what we would call hermits today, which then grew into the different orders of being a monkhood.
Mm-hmm.
And they practice using what they call as a sacred word. And it could be any of those things that are mentioned. It could also be Amen, and as well as with your breath and so forth. So it's kind of, and then there's other fashions of prayer too, under the umbrella of contemplative prayer, but centering prayer is something that's
So would they do this in community or individually?
Both.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you know, Reb Zalman of blessed memory used to call it a socialized meditation. The idea of sitting with other people and that increasing the potential for greater success. I don't know if that's the correct word, in one's meditation practice, by being surrounded with other people.
The Quakers, when they sit at their meeting, they sit in silence. And I've done that. I was a Quaker for 10, 12 years. And it's amazing at some meetings where there is this silence, there is a buildup of energy that we can all feel. And it was really very beautiful. And it's just this energy that's really, really very pleasing and yeah.
Nice. So let's take a moment. Mary Rita?
For a further kind of, it's, I would say, enjoyment and just for depth, there's a wonderful, it can be a 42-minute YouTube video with Reb Zalman and Father Thomas Keating. Now they don't talk much about centering prayer, but they were friends. And Rami Shapiro, I think, is kind of like the moderator. You know, in some of the YouTube video I saw, he only spoke once, but he was the one that pulled it all together, and it's really wonderful. So be a really nice follow-up, you know, to see.
Nice. Would you please send me the
I will.
the
It's
link?
called The Kiss of God.
And I'll put it out to everyone. As a matter of fact, I'm taking your picture, everybody's picture right now, so I know who was here. On the count of 3, say hi. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. For those of you who don't have your videos on, well, you're just a name. So let's take a minute to use Reb Rami's words to take us a little more deeper into presence. You know, Talmud Torah is one of the ways of meeting in Bria, you know, meeting in the world of thought, and of course, certainly Yetzirah, our emotional lives are also stirred up during that time, and hopefully, in our discussions, we, on occasion, if we're so blessed, we touch the face of divinity. For me, as you know me, singing, and especially singing sacred text, is one way that I accomplish that for myself. And so let's use Reb Rami's words and Shir Yaakov's melody to sing. I'm trying to make this a little bigger. I'll have to scroll. Here we go. We've sung this many times. My invitation to you is to sing it for the first time. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. We are loved, Loved, loved by unending love and unending love. We are loved, loved, loved by unending love and unending love. So I'm not sure I ever noticed that before, that he very skillfully travels and guides us from Moachin de Katnut to Moachin de Gadlut. And every time we sing the chorus, we are loved by an unending love, the invitation is to spacious mind. And in all the verses, it's more of a recognition of the world that we necessarily live in as co-creators in God's dream. Never noticed that before for myself. So let's continue on. Unless anybody has any reflections, observations, Mira Bracha, welcome. Okay, Haf, yeah.
So on the realm of narrow mind, spacious mind, I must share in the last hour, my wife has her children, her daughter, and 3 grandchildren visiting from Canada, where they live in the Jewish section of Canada. And the daughter just got put into a beautiful Jewish school. And I had a vision of this incredibly spacious mind that was going to come out of her learning. And the last hour, I heard in a very unfortunate conversation about half the school's Ashkenazi Jews, half the school is Sephardic Jews, half the school are pro-Trumpers, half the school are anti-Trumpers. And she went through a litany of what I consider to be traditional high school BS, when I thought she'd be getting this expansive education, and she's going through a lot of narrow-mindedness, much to my great disappointment. They were very honest about it, but I was just really disgruntled, the narrowness of the mind as opposed to the expansiveness of the mind. So I just share that as a evening bummer.
But that's quite different from the poetry on Shabbos morning, Haf.
I'm sorry, it's just, I'm forlorn at the moment.
If you want to talk about it later, I'd be happy to do so. But I am curious, what is the Jewish section of Canada?
It's called Mount Blanc, I think, or Mount View. Someone might know out there, but it's a very, very Orthodox and traditional, wonderful section of Canada in Montreal.
Oh, in Montreal.
It's north of Montreal.
Deborah?
Is
Yeah,
it north of Montreal or in the city?
It's in the city,
Uh-huh.
by the mountain.
Gotcha.
Mount Royal.
So this is why Reb Rami, in what I read to, in what he wrote to begin with, is suspicious of religion, right? And why he describes himself in the way that he does it, a practitioner of spiritual wisdom that draws upon all and none of religious tradition. I once heard that Gandhi said, but I don't remember who he said it to, "I love your Jesus, I don't like your Christian." Does anybody know who he was talking to? Bruce?
He was talking to Howard Thurman, I think.
Does everybody know who Howard Thurman was? So to make a very, Howard Thurman was the head of the theology department. He taught at Boston U, but there's a wonderful story about Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman is the unspoken hero of the civil rights movement, and the hero of all of everyone whose names we know.
But an important story for us all to know, as you can find on my blog, A Year of Stories that I dedicated to Reb Zalman, comes from one of his books, Reb Zalman's books, about when he met Robert Thurman. It's a great story. Should I tell it quickly?
Yes.
That Reb Zalman was traveling an hour and a half to get to school at BU, working on a doctorate. And he gets up so early, has time to daven. He gets to school and he's looking for a place to daven. And he's in, the area where there's a chapel and Robert Thurman's office, but he has not met Robert Thurman yet. And what does Reb Zalman find? He finds he finds icons, and he can't daven there. And so he goes into a separate chapel that doesn't have any icons, and he davens from there. And he leaves, but unknown to him, he is noticed. And he's noticed by he would learn later to be Howard Thurman. And for a number of days, they go back and forth. Reb Zalman leaves the Siddur open to Psalms, and Robert Thurman goes in and he turns it to, he leaves Reb Zalman a message from the book of Psalms. And pretty soon Reb Zalman realizes that there's something going on here. The first time he sees Robert Thurman, he doesn't know who he is. He thinks maybe, he's the janitor. But he goes eventually into, he needs to plan his classes, and he goes into Robert Thurman's office, where he meets him for the first time. And Reb Zalman's struggling over whether Boston University is a place that he can accomplish what he needs to accomplish, work on his doctorate. And he discovers that it's been Howard Thurman, that he's been having this conversation with, unspoken conversation, and he's very honest with Howard Thurman, that he questions whether he can do it here, in this milieu. And Howard Thurman says to him, "What's wrong? Don't you trust the Ruach HaKodesh?" He says it to him in Hebrew. "Don't you trust the Holy Spirit?" And from there on in, Howard Thurman remains a major part of Reb Zalman's life. Howard Thurman influenced Reb Zalman in one way, in that he would set up experiential Torah, experiential theology, inviting people into the kind of experiences that Reb Zalman later did with Jewish practice, right? For people to be able to do a deep dive into texts by experiencing it for themselves. And of course, Reb Zalman always is famous for saying Judaism is over-intellectualized and under-experienced. Well, part of one of the places he gets that from is Howard Thurman. There's a wonderful documentary on Howard Thurman. I didn't do his life nor the Reb Zalman story justice. I've got you all here, and I know who you are, and I will send out an email later tonight or before I leave tomorrow with the link to my blog, which basically I put in word for word Reb Zalman's words. Okay, so it's not my story telling the story, because I know I butchered it in many ways. All righty. Forgiveness. This is a biggie. This is all part of the letting go of our stories. And in the chapter on forgiveness, which begins on page 109, forgiveness is not forgetting, excusing, accepting, denying, or numbing yourself to pain. Right? So I'm going to jump forward to page 114, where Rabbi Rami does us a great service by unpacking 3 different kinds of situations that we encounter that we need forgiveness for, that we'll experience something from which we need to extricate ourselves from. And I'm trying to make a bookmark somewhere that come back to this next high holidays and make this the basis of some work that we'll do in Elul. So bottom of page 114, someone please read for us that last paragraph about forgiving iniquity. So this is avon, all right? And these are the three words, avon and pesha and chata, that we repeat over and over and over and over again on Yom Kippur. Three different types of sins. But we're not going to go into what you even mean by that word, because that word itself is loaded. Okay, somebody please read bottom of page 114.
Iniquity is gross injustice. It is an act of premeditated exploitation. You have done something to benefit yourself at the expense of another. The means is most often deceit. You lied about yourself or a situation and allowed the other person to make decisions based on faulty information.
Gewalt. Huh?
Ooh.
Yeah. So certainly in business practices, but hey, let's be honest. I doubt if there's any one of us who didn't at some point in our life manipulate somebody else into doing what we wanted them to do, because it would end up better for us if that's the way the things turned out. I'm not asking anybody to raise their hands, but I'll raise my hand on behalf of us all. All righty. So someone does that to you. How do you forgive that? Let's see. I think this is a really important section, so I want to spend a little time here and read Rabbi Rami's words. Somebody pop a page. Carol, would you continue? Pop up page 115.
How do you forgive gross injustice? For simplicity's sake, I will address this as if you were seeking forgiveness rather than bestowing it. To do the latter, simply adjust this conversation accordingly.
Okay.
First, you admit that the injustice happened. Second, you do what you can to correct it and make amends. Third, you allow yourself to feel the shame and guilt. Your conscience improves without defense or drama. And fourth, you let the drama go.
Great.
Tough actions.
That's for sure. And it's especially the fourth thing that the Rambam does not cover in all of his writings on forgiveness, that Reb Rami has been talking a lot about in this, and especially the last two chapters, on emet, the truth. You can't stand the truth. You can't handle the truth. That we get caught up in our stories and they weave a web. I always encourage people to use Ana B'Koach, that we chant on Friday nights, but it's also in the morning service. And the first line being Ana B'Koach, Gedulat Yemincha Tatir Tzrura, please, with your great strength of your right hand, all metaphor, of course, unloosen the tangles, Tatir Tzrura, release us. Like Matir Asurim in our morning blessings, to releases the ones who are imprisoned. We're not talking about the prisons with bars. We're talking the bars that we create for ourselves with the actions that we take, and then remaining there because let's face it, some of us get addicted to our shortcomings. And we pray at that altar, and certainly not a very healthy way to live. So he says, the fourth thing is to let the drama go. And we let the drama go. And where do we have a more possibility of ending up? In spacious mind, right? Because the drama exists in Mochin de Katnut, and it exists in narrow mind. It resists where the place where the ego reigns, R-E-I-G-N-S, right? You're no good. You'll never be any good. Feel guilt over this forever, right? Next, that's the first time, and the first kind of situation, and not easy. So he continues now, and I made note that in his instructions to us in the next paragraph, he's going to go through all four worlds. How do you let go of the drama? How do you forgive iniquity? How do you forgive such a gross injustice that someone's done to you? Or how do you forgive yourself, often more difficult, of something you did to somebody else? He's going to give us a four-world model for that. Would somebody pick up, let those memories of iniquity come to you in full force? Anybody? Deborah.
Let those memories of iniquity come to you in full force. Write them down in a journal in detail. Pay special attention to how the other person responded when the pain of your action was felt. Begin with the physical. What was the person's body language? How did the shock and pain manifest themselves in his body? Be specific. In this way, you will have a more difficult time pretending that the pain you caused wasn't that bad.
So here he's taking a chapter from the book of Musar, which is to write, down, so that you have it right there in front of your face in black and white. And this paragraph is speaking of begin with the physical. So we're in Asiya, right? Notice what happens to somebody else's, Asiadic world and how their bodies respond. Or to flip it, like he says at the beginning, if you need to, how is this, where is this living in your body? This memory of having done this gross injustice, this manipulation perhaps to another human being. So now we're going to go from Asiya to Yetzirah, from the physical to the emotional realm, the realm of formation, how these things come to be and the shape that they take. Someone can pick up, please. Now move on.
Judy has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Judy.
Judy.
Thank you, Bruce.
I just want to, and I hate to debate the meaning of words necessarily, but did drama at some point come to have this negative connotation? Has drama, the word drama, always implied some negative connotation of that's kind of being put on as part of this discussion? I'm just, I feel like there are certain dramatic things that happen in life that are just part of life, but somehow drama has become this like fraught word. And I don't know, was it always that way, or is that a modern interpretation of the word? And I apologize, I guess I'm taking us off track here, but it just, when I hear that, I'm just not certain that is exactly what this is that you're describing.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy. Judy, you want to take a stab at that?
If you go back to the ancient Greeks, drama was used to work out evil in the world. That was one of the purposes of dramatic interpretation. And I think, though, that in the modern world, drama has become a slang for, exactly what you're referring to, Judy.
Yeah, so I appreciate your sensitivity towards the word. And maybe there's a better word, but I'm understanding it to mean the drama that we spin for ourselves and the stories that we get trapped in. Right, the character that we.
So maybe the stories we get trapped in is the way for me to think about it, because the word itself it's become something that it maybe. Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, if the word doesn't work, change the word. Okay. Oh, so someone was reading, yes? Someone was about. Oh no, someone was about to read, but no one had their hand up. So I'll read. Oh, Mary, read it. You need to turn your volume up just a little bit, I think, if you can do that. Move on to the emotional level.
Okay, here we go. Now move on to the emotional level. What feelings did your actions evoke? Don't settle for the obvious anger. Note note the anger and then look more deeply. Look for the sadness, for the loss of self-esteem, for the loss of trust. See how the other person turned on himself, compounding his pain by blaming himself for what you did. Shift your focus to the level of...
Okay, intellect. So now we're going into...
That's the next world.
That's all right. So now we're going into Bria.
Shift your focus to the level of story, the intellect. What story did you shatter in the other? What damaging story did you plant in him? In what way have you infected his sense of what is real with a sense of unreality? In what way have you robbed him of hope, trust, and safety?
Right. And then he says, as you follow these steps, you'll feel horrible. Oh, great. Thank you, Rami. But that's the first step towards nake, right? To cleansing ourselves of these, of the past, of the story that we hold on to then entraps us, like I said before. And it says, feel bad, it won't kill you, right? Which is really true. It does not mean don't seek out professional help if you need it to work through something like this, right? Because some of the things that we do can be overwhelming, and we're not equipped necessarily to look as honestly at ourselves without help, either a friend or a professional. All right. So I'm not speaking about some la la land of you do this work and all will be cleansed. Assuming you've done this, let it go. Next page, 116. How? The next time the memory arises, don't give yourself over to the drama. Yes, I did that. I won't do it again. There's no point in dwelling on it. And doing so simply feeds my narcissism. Better to do something constructive with my time and energy. Now, that's what I was talking about before, which is some of us get addicted to our faults, right? And our less thans. And if someone would help me understand this Hasidic saying, I would be appreciative, because I think I understand it, but I'm not positive. The Hasidim have a saying, no matter how you stir a pot of filth, it's always a pot of filth. Better to let the pot be and string pearls for the sake of heaven. Scott, you're you're looking, I don't know. I get the first part. But I'm going to take a stab at anybody. Go ahead, Dan.
I think this is talking about your internal pot of filth of how you feel about yourself. And you can play with it, move it around, stir it around, but it's still a pot of filth. You need to separate yourself from it and look at beautiful things.
Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I like that. I'm thinking of it in kind of a physical way too. When you stir, well, you can't see, I know you're stirring the pot, but when you string pearls, you're using both hands, you're making something beautiful, and it's a different physical action. It's something else that you're doing with your hands that is making something, is creating something.
I like that. That's a nice image. Hoff, and then Deborah.
You know the old song, Turn, 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 and for every season, there's different things we do. And I don't like to think in absolutes because quite frankly, I think there are times personally when dirtying the pot is okay because the pot needs to be dirty, not as a general matter of action and performance in your life in general, but I don't have a clean slate, nor do I want a clean slate of guilt-free actions because sometimes, even in retrospect, those actions are meaningful, worthy, and I think necessary. So I'm trying to find a ground of equilibrium for there is a time for peace and a time for war.
I'm wondering whether you're talking about the inherent messiness of life.
I'm talking about the balance of life.
Okay. Thank you. Deborah and Mary Rita.
Well, I kind of see it as deal with it because it's there. It doesn't, you can't get rid of it because it's happened. So deal with it and then let it be and move on to better things.
Yeah, I think that's what I get from it too. It's enough already. Stop dwelling on it and turn your attention to some way that you can be a constructive, creative human being. Mary Rita, I'm not saying it's easy.
So for me, the string of pearls was like to focus on, here I am going to finish where I started, which is that the string of pearls, and you can add to it and act to it, but it's the acts of loving kindness. And we're not perfect. So the pot of filth, I don't like that image because it reminds me of the Baltimore catechisms, what they would show what sin looked like or whatever. It would be a pot of filth. Well, it was like a black milk bottle or something. But like, we're not perfect, but there is a sense with each act of loving kindness to put the focus there. That's what we're called to do, and that's what's going to stir a different kind of pot.
Thank you. By the way, does anybody know this song? Ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, di-di-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-ba-da-dum, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Why am I even asking that question? It has something to do with what we just read. Anybody? Roxanne? You don't know your big band music. It's called String of Pearls. Of course. You should know by now, I seldom ask a question in which the answer is not embedded already. All right, I want to be mindful of time. Clearly, we're not finishing this chapter. We're not going to finish the end of the book. So all of those in favor of going one more week, say aye. Aye, or say aye, aye, aye. How many of you can come next week to wrap this up? All right, good. That's enough for me. Good. So I'll be here next Wednesday night with those of you who can make it. Judy, did you want to say something? You still have your hand up or no? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask something of this community, and perhaps this falls in the category of drama, though not drama like baggage, drama like unexpected things happening. So earlier this evening during this discussion, I stepped away because my phone was ringing, and the man whose life I helped to save 6 months ago was calling because he was having new symptoms that worried him, and for which I advised he go to the emergency department. And so I hope that you all can just join me in sending some prayers his way. Hopefully this is something easily remediable, but his blood pressure was very high, and that worried him and that worried me. So appreciate you all his name is Seth, keeping him in your prayers.
Thank you, Judy. So let's just take a moment to hold Seth, to pray that he's in good hands and that the hands of those who are serving him at this time be guided by their skills and by their passion, all of which is connected to their source, which is ours as well. And may the next time you tell us about him, you'll be sharing words of encouragement.
Amen.
Thank you, Judy. Meir bracha.
So now it's really, you know what, after this and what Judy shared, I don't have a need to say this anymore.
Oh, okay. All right, so we need a closing. Carol, please.
How about the 13 attributes?
All righty.
Nai Adonai El Rachum Vechanun Erech Chaim Verav Chesed Notzer Chesed Im Osei Esha Vechata V'na Good night.
Thank you, Carol.
I just was in the mood.
I appreciate it. We didn't even have to hide ourselves in the cleft of the rock. But instead, we were able again to witness all of our goodness pass before us through the image of God that is embedded in each and every one of us. Thank you also so much for blessing this room, for your presence, blessed presence for each other. I will not see you this Shabbat, but instead, of course, Rabbi Jeff Roth, you'll be in good hands. Bruce, Merry Christmas. And anybody else who practices Christmas as a part of your spiritual tradition, I wish you the same.
Rabbi Mark, we're going to treat Rabbi Jeff Roth just like any substitute teacher would be treated in high school. I promise you, nothing worse.
Behaf, I want to invite you to stay after school this evening so we can have a short.
You should invite me not to attend. That's what you do.
Conversation.
You can stop recording right now.
Thank you.